All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Andy, and I'm with Integrity Data Insights, and I help other companies with their reporting and analytics. And I'm so glad today to have my guest, Kevin Jackson, joining me. And I met Kevin at the Cincy AI meeting, and I guess it was June. I think it
It was
was, but
June. Yeah.
was really blown away by Kevin's passion and enthusiasm. He just went up there and just nailed it. And I was like, man, I got to talk to this guy. So afterwards we met and kept a conversation. And then the more I heard about what you do, the more I was really intrigued because I was like, wow, this is data. This is data. I'm a data guy. So with all that, Kevin, thank you so much for being here.
No, I'm so glad to be here. Appreciate it, Andy. And yeah, that was great to meet out there at Cincy AI Week. That whole event was awesome, and it was great to connect there. And happy to be here on your show. This is really exciting.
Oh, thanks. So let's dig into it. So Kevin, your company, it's level 6, right? Is that level 6 cybersecurity?
Exactly right.
And I guess before we get into the specifics of what your company does, maybe just lay out the atmosphere of what's it like for, obviously you hear all these cyber attacks and things going on. Maybe just paint the picture for you've worked in this industry for a while. What's it like out there and what are the people that are working in this field, facing every day?
Yeah, it is. It's always a kind of an ugly scene in cybersecurity. And those of us who have worked on the inside of it for a long time, we've watched kind of the evolution of attacks and of failures in security, while we've also watched, of course, the tracking of the defensive capabilities and the best practices and watch the evolution of standards. So it's being on the forefront of a war, right? You're always seeing the defenses try to keep up with the attacks, and the attackers try to evolve and take advantage of the new or change or alter defenses. And it would seem like there's a good chance here on the defensive side, often called the blue team side of things, where cybersecurity decision makers live. It would seem like there's a chance, right, to catch up and to defend better with so much new technology and so many new strategies that are out there. The problem always is, and this is kind of the reason that our company exists.
Yeah.
The problem is every defender, every chief information security officer, charged with managing security for an organization, or whoever the decision maker is always dealing with limited resources. And on the other side, you get the feeling that the bad guys tend to not have a lot of limits on their resources. They have it a little more easy, right? Because
Right.
they are able to just use a lot of automation to attack, and they have specific targets they can hit, and they mass produce attacks. Whereas every organization that's defending itself, you've got to defend your specific organization. So you're focused, but
Right.
you've got limited resources. No one has infinite dollars. No one has infinite personnel or time to put into the defense of data, of systems, and of their organization. That's the problem we were after, because what I saw across my career as a chief information security officer and as a consultant in a bunch of arenas is it's not just security. It's how you do security correctly, given your limitations, given dollars and budget, given people and time. That's the real issue. Because
Because
you see it in the news all the time. It's an ugly scene out there that we have to manage.
right. I mean, it's probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, it's not probably the sexiest thing to, invest in. Like, hey, we're, like when budgets are created by these big organizations, they probably are thinking, well, can we get by cutting a little bit on that? We haven't had an attack for a while or things. It's almost like in, insurance, right?
Yes.
You kind of don't, if all's going well, you probably think, hey, maybe we can take a cut there. And is that kind of some of what you think is you're seeing?
Not only is that's not even theory. That is 100% true. I can literally tell you stories from customers of ours who we've talked to in the past few months that are facing budget cuts in their cybersecurity spend. Now, from the outside, if you're not in that space, you might think, why would any company cut their cybersecurity spend? Aren't you
Yeah,
terrified you're going
right.
to get breached, you're going to get hacked? But that doesn't stop the company from having to balance its own budget. You've got to spend on products and on your personnel and on other things. You've got to develop, you've got to market, you've got to sell, whatever it is you do as an organization, rather it's a nonprofit or for profit.
It's
And the things on the security side of the house, they do look like just they're the costs. They're not part of the earnings. They're the things you have to do business. So finding ways to do more with less is really a common theme, even in an environment like ours, where we hear about breaches all the time, where people who are in that chair who have to build
Right.
cybersecurity programs are being told regularly, do more with less. Are you sure you need this much money? Do you really need that many people? What is this? What is that? And are having pressure put on them from all sides to keep security high while limiting and having even more limited resources.
Right, and one analogy, I always love analogies that like the one that came to me when you're thinking is the old one about football where they say, defense wins championships, but offense sells tickets. Is that right?
Right,
I feel
right.
like that's a little bit of what you're dealing with, right? Is everybody knows they need to do it, but it's like, hey, can I, get some little bit more flash over here, dig into something else, and so tell me about so the term it's CISO, right? Is the abbreviation for the people? What is it? CISO, like Chief
Yes.
Information Security Officer? Is that it?
Exactly. And in some environments, they'll just be called a chief security officer or CSO. In the defense world and government world, there's sometimes information security officers or information system security officers, ISSOs. Lots of different titles that all mean the cybersecurity decision maker. In large orgs, it typically is a C-suite. It's a chief information security officer or the CISO or CISO. Some people pronounce it CISO. There's an ongoing debate about CISO versus CISO.
But
We won't get
yeah,
into that up here, but it's one of those
sure.
pronunciation things.
But I guess
But
no matter how you pronounce it, I mean, I think the picture is before we get in one more thing, before we get into kind of your solution is these people are burning out. They're quitting. So much stress and pressure on
yes,
the CISOs that, that's kind of what motivated you guys to kind of form your company, right?
that's exactly right. I mean, the burnout rates are through the roof. One of the things we get to see a lot, we're selling a product that goes to these cybersecurity decision makers. In the course of our 2+ years in business, I cannot tell you how many organizations that we talked to 18 months ago, 2 years ago, where the CISO's already gone. They've
Yeah.
long turned over. Some places that I could name you have turned over twice in the leadership role of who's managing security just in the last 2 years, because
Yeah.
it is so tough. It's kind of a thankless position. When things are going
Yeah.
well, you rarely see the cybersecurity decision maker being praised, or being told, my gosh, do more. Here's some additional budget. It's this great. It's the opposite. When things are going well, you typically get told, well, maybe we can pull back your budget. When things go
Yeah.
poorly, when things go south, and they do all the time, that's usually where the blame lands. When that breach
Oh, yeah.
happens, when it happens, well, it's clearly because the decision maker didn't make the right calls, and either they are even under more pressure than, or they're looking for another job. It is a
Right.
very difficult place to be. I mean, obviously, at the larger organizations, those folks get paid pretty well, but they also have an insane amount of stress, a 24/7 job, the looming potential of incidents, major or minor, that are always there. That is another problem that, frankly, it's not talked about often enough, because if the folks who are pulling the strings and creating the strategies to protect you, if they don't feel secure, if they're constantly watching their back, if
Right.
they as all these things are spiraling around them, and you're having to turn over in that position, how does that help your strategy? That's a
Right.
huge risk in and of itself.
Right, and all that knowledge and anything you've gained with that person's out the door.
Exactly right.
So let's talk about your company. This is why, like, and I was impressed by your speech at the Cincy AI, but I will admit I was a little bit like, well, that's cybersecurity. That's not for me. Then I loved when I found out more. It's like, wow, this is based on data, and now you got my attention. So tell me what level six security is, and kind of what you guys offer.
Absolutely. So it was just over 2 years ago now when we founded Level 6 Cybersecurity as a startup right here in Cincinnati. We're just in the Cincinnati suburbs. And everything
Nice.
I just described was really the catalyst of what we do. Aside from being a cybersecurity person for the past now, 30 years as a technologist, I've also been a data guy. I've done some work as a business intelligence designer and data architect while doing security and compliance, largely for the Air Force when I was with Booz Allen, but also with some other orgs over the years. And when I was managing a cybersecurity program at a pretty large pharmaceutical company here in the area, that's really when the idea came to me. Really when the pain settled on me of realizing that far too many decisions are being made without the help of data, of analytics. When I looked at the financial side of the house in any of these orgs, or at marketing and sales, or at business development, those folks were using BI tools. They're using business intelligence. And I know this is where you live.
Yeah.
They're using those tools to do forecasts, to do analytics. They're getting trend analysis. They're using real world data from other sources to figure out what works, what doesn't, what to do next. We're going to market this way. We're going to sell that. We're going to go into this new arena with a new product.
Right.
In financial forecasts galore, predictive modeling, they're doing all of that. And they're getting answers, right, for what to do based on data. And I'm sitting over here in cybersecurity, literally trying to keep the entire place up and running and safe from ransomware or from having our data stolen or having, the headline show, pharmaceutical company gets breached, working to keep, all the security. But my decisions were being based on, okay, this sounds good. That vendor sounds pretty good. I had success with this in the past, or what one or two consultants would say, versus why don't I have data? Why don't I have analytics like the rest of the business has to show me real world results? What's actually happening? I looked at the fact that there's about, 100,000 other companies in the world like the one I was at that do security. And if you have that kind of data, why aren't we looking at it and figuring out what actually has been working best for these folks? But then I really got excited when I thought, wait, not only that, we could figure out what works best given what they're spending and how they're building their teams and what they're putting in, so that I could see cost benefit using real world examples, so that I could know, wait, if this set of companies here are making these decisions, and it's only costing them A, and another set is doing these decisions and it's costing them B, but they're both getting the same results, then I would know, okay, then I know what to do because I can better use my limited resources.
Right.
So that was what started it off.
That's brilliant. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems so simple, right? And I heard once that kind of the best inventions start with simple ideas. And a simple idea is, let's do analytics on what's actually working, and then let users follow those breadcrumbs more towards what works instead of what doesn't, given a given set of resources.
I love
so from
it.
there, we built out the model and the design for a product, and that's what got us to here.
Awesome. So maybe walk me through, like, I'm a CISO, I'm a cybersecurity, there's cyber, I can always get it wrong. Chief Information Security Officer, sorry. So that's my role. And I come to you, hey, Kevin, I'm in charge of this big, company, and I only have, whatever the budget is. Walk me through kind of how do you interact with me? How kind of maybe just walk kind of how does that work? Walk me through it.
Yeah, there's a lot to say there, and really,
probably
the most important part of that. Again, I sitting in that seat myself for a long time in different ways, in different arenas, taught me a couple of key things that we wanted to do to try to help the CISO, to help this cybersecurity decision maker. Again, our whole goal was, how can we take some of this stress, some of this pressure off of them? How can I help the folks who were sitting where I sat and provide them with something they don't have now, that doesn't increase their own risk, and it doesn't, make the situation worse while trying to help them. So one of the main things we do with our product, it's called Listen, which is LISN, the Level 6 InfoSec Strategy Network. Listen is a data tool that the title of it's literally a play on words, because one of our taglines is, the data is out there, it's time to listen to it.
Nice.
So our strategy network, it's literally a network-based tool taking in data from the real world to help you model and see for yourself what works best for the cost, progressively and over time, and constantly learning in a machine learning environment. So, like, one of the key things was, I don't want to force these cyber decision makers to create a new point of risk just by using my tool. So we don't force our users to plug in our software into their environment. We actually don't sit on their network. We don't have to connect through their firewall. We don't have an API and integrate with their tools. We allow them to model their security environment completely anonymously in a separate cloud-based tool, so that they are not having to go through the mini hoops of adding yet another cyber tool into their network and adding another point of risk.
Okay, so they're going to input some data about what their organization is like. Maybe give me just a little bit more details on that part, but I think I'm following.
Absolutely. So imagine you log into a fully independent, anonymous tool where your company's identity is actually not stored. It's just a token ID into our data warehouse. And then you basically build a profile of your organization's strategy level approaches. And by that, I mean things like cadence of operations, how often you do different things. For example, how often you audit and review all of your Active Directory accounts, how often you do incident response tests, and how often you do vendor management surveys, how often you do training, how often you do data governance work, how you've built out your data classification scheme, your roles and responsibilities, what you've outsourced, what's being done by third parties in your cyber program, what you've insourced and are doing internally, how many people on your cyber team, your budget. Do you have policies and procedures defined and actually written in different areas? How often do you review them? All the high level strategy questions that actually define what you're doing. We don't ask questions about vendors. Like, we don't care if you're using, SentinelOne or Microsoft Defender. It doesn't matter. But we do want to know, are you using a cloud-based third-party endpoint antivirus? Is it an endpoint detection and response tool? Is it another kind of antivirus tool? Because we are collecting data on everything I just said, and about several hundred more variables are what we're constantly collecting data on from the real world, so that we can compare the results, the outcomes that the real world is seeing for the cost with what you're doing and its cost, so that you get then analytics out anonymously showing you what's working best for the cost and giving you recommendations of where to pivot, where to zig and zag, and then how to see that over time as well.
Cool. So I input all that information, then I get kind of a dashboard or something that kind of shows me like, look, here's my, I don't know, I'm just making some stuff up, but here's some recommendations on this part. You should be so they get like, physical information that they can kind of that they can react to. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Metrics, a scoring system that kind of shows overall in each area, like in data governance or in cyber training or in identity and access management, giving them a metric to see, given the strategies you have in place right now, how well you're doing with using your dollars and your time. And then recommendations that they can actually see, rank ordered. Here's a prioritized list of things you may want to look into changing because you may be spending too much or too little in a given area, all based on the real world data for their industry and orgs about their size. So like, automatically the tool keeps the data and the answers relevant to them. Because one thing we've learned from the academic research, which we also consume, is that, if you're a manufacturing organization with 500 people, your spend and approach is probably going to be different than if you are a 200,000 person financial services company in New York. It actually is different. That you'll pay different for tools. You have different risks. You have different threats that head your way. And the rates of failure are different, and the costs of failure are different. So the tool automatically scales everything for your industry and your size and your sector, so that you're seeing relevant results to you, what matters most on an org like yours.
Yeah, I love that. So it's not like you're just surfacing some generic, here's something that's happening. It's like it's specific based on all that information they told you about what their company is like.
Exactly. And it does all that automatically. And this is always the best part. It allows the user, if I'm a chief information security officer using this tool and I get all these answers, that's great. But what I really am interested in is 3 months from now, 5 months from now, sometimes 1 month from now, something big changes or happens in cybersecurity, and I want to know how it affects me and my strategies. Our tool automatically is tracking those kinds of changes because we're always taking in new data. So how that plays and what may shift for me over time, I'll no longer have to figure out or just wonder, gosh, I wish I could keep track of all the news and all the headlines and what big has changed, because our tool Listen is doing that for them. Great example. Last month, the headlines were dominated by the CrowdStrike failure.
Yeah,
right? It affected everyone everywhere. It was not a cyber attack, right? It was not a cybersecurity.
Right. It was like somebody they messed with the release or something, right?
Right. It was a patch management failure. But guess what? Availability, having your systems up and running, is a cybersecurity area. So even though it wasn't an attack, we talk about the patch management, vulnerability management, how your systems patch, and the rates you do them and how you do them and what you test. That's something we already had data on. So we were actually really excited to look and see that, those who are following Listen's recommendations already would have already known that this area of how you patch third-party software, particularly on your servers, actually was the #1 highest correlation with success per dollar already before CrowdStrike happened. So that kind of insight. And now, because it happened, there's a new wave of interest in, okay, do we need to change how we're letting outside parties do patching on our stuff? And probably, but is it worth the cost? What's the risk? We've got analytics on all that already. That already would have been in hand for those users. That's
Wow.
what we're going for. Because every month something new big happens. And we want
So
our users to not have to worry, to be able to look and see, okay, what are the results of this? Does this matter to me? Should I change something or should I not, based on its value?
So I'm guessing, like, the great thing is I'm in that role, right? I'm back in the cybersecurity role, and I get these reports, and then I can kind of, either work with my leadership team to say, look, this is what the recommendation is. I know you're telling me to cut X percent, but if we
Yeah.
do that, you realize based on the data, that's where all the attacks have. So I'm guessing that kind of changes the total. It gives the CISO a weapon, kind of.
Yes.
Back to your analogy with the war. You're in this war, but it gives them not necessarily a weapon. Even against. I mean, yeah, definitely the first weapon is against the bad people doing this stuff in the first place, but the second weapon it gives them is against their own internal team, which is fighting
Yes.
them for dollars.
That's 100% true. You nailed that exactly right. The concept of a shield is overused in cybersecurity. Like every other vendor has a shield somewhere in their logo or on their website. So we're not using that, but I can't tell you how often it has seemed like part of what we're doing is giving that cybersecurity decision maker a shield, some cover in how strategies are created. Because so often it comes down to the board or the rest of the C-suite, the CEO and the CFO, really sensing and seeing that the CISO, the cyber decision makers, giving them their opinions or their take on things or their gut feel on things. And that is a bad place to be, as opposed to being able to say, here's what the analytics say, here's what the data says. Now, one way they try to get close to that is with consultants, right? Because they can say, well, the consultants say this. The problem with consultants, and I can say this because I am one and have been one for the majority of my career,
Me
is
too.
that consultants are also people that are using inputs from sources. None of us as consultants have millions of data points in our head in a machine learning model that are
Right,
constantly being fed with new data doing analytics. We realize that strategy
right.
should be a data problem, not an opinion problem, not a guess or a vendor problem. Like strategy should be an analytic, a data problem, and then how you do implementation and tactics. That's where you can use your consultants and
Right.
more of the hands-on things. But the strategies themselves, in every arena, frankly, really should be a data problem.
Right. I love this. So tell me, speaking of data, I mean, I know we got into a little bit of it and, don't need you to go into all the weeds, but give us a little bit more flavor of what you're collecting and how that works and, where do you get it from, that kind of stuff about the data that you're using to surface to these people.
Yes, and that's where it starts to get really exciting because over the past 10 to 15 years, we've seen a steady ramp up in the nature of disclosures and the nature of news coverage and research into cybersecurity events, breaches, failures, success stories, and a huge increase in the academic research into what happens in cybersecurity in different areas. That the timing aspect of this was a really big deal because if this was 15 years ago, there really wouldn't be the data availability yet necessarily to build a tool like ours.
Right.
We are heavily dependent on input data from the real world. But over this last, X number of years, as disclosure has become more and more the name of the game, as more research has been put out, as the number of news sources that do investigative reports into cybersecurity has grown by 100 times in the past 15 years. There are
Right.
so many resources out there with experts in the field who look at what happens and do their own analyses
Like
and capture news.
forensics, right? Basically.
Yes, government regulation has leaned into that as well with the SEC and with the federal government and with Department of Health and Human Services and other orgs that have mandated you must disclose when something bad happens security related. It has to be out there. The public needs to know. State legislatures and state attorney general's offices, like more than half the states, have formal laws that you have to disclose. So all that is a huge boon, as painful as it is for the orgs who have to disclose bad things. It's
Right.
a huge boon to orgs everywhere else because companies like ours can absorb all of that data and use it in advanced models to do what we just described, to calculate what strategies correlate with losses the most and what strategies correlate with success for various costs. So our team, we have a really great team here of they're OSINT engineers, open source intelligence engineers, because all that I just described that's publicly available about
Yeah.
how cybersecurity works, it's open source intelligence. And our team uses some AI tools, some data mining tools, and some manual processes to absorb, review, categorize everything about cyber breaches and even cyber success stories, which interestingly, there are quite a
Yeah.
few out there. You come across them.
Yeah.
And they bring all that into our model through a typical data extraction, transform, and load process. So it's
Okay.
really exciting how all that works. And the field of possible data to consume literally grows every month because there's so much more out there that's being disclosed, and because the ability to take it in fast has been powered by AI, by tools that intelligently help you gather data quickly for a tool like ours.
Right. So you guys are using AI to kind of on the or machine learning. I didn't know those two terms kind of get interchangeably used, but you guys are using that to kind of maybe talk a little bit more about what you're doing with that because I could
Yeah.
say, but I'm going to guess. So I'll probably guess wrong.
Well, yeah, literally just in this past few weeks, our internal developers have rolled out a new set of tools that are not for our end users, our customers, but are for our internal OSINT engineers to advance in how we go about taking data from literally all over the world and automatically categorizing it into
Oh
getting
yeah.
information on the organizations, the types of breaches, the type of threats, the losses, automating more and more of that process with
Yeah.
tools that, I mean, our developers are geniuses. We just found the best people in the world, and they have
Yeah.
begun to automate that process so that our OSINT engineers, we used to call them data harvesters because frankly, that's what they felt like. They were out there harvesting the data. We started
Right.
manually, and now we've moved fully forward to using web crawlers and data scrapers and mining techniques to pull data in rapidly and auto research some of the information. Because again, we're looking at the industry, the sector, the revenue, the roles and responsibilities, the titles of personnel. All those are correlation factors, and most of that can be gotten automatically. We've got tools that will, with given another org name that shows up with a breach, can go and find all that kind of info and pre-stage it so that we are off and running to research what was going on at that organization at the time of this failure, or to research an org that has an interview out or a news article about how great their cybersecurity is, which is great data for us to mine because then we can
Right.
capture that. And then if they ever do have a failure, we'll know what strategies they were using. So all of that feeds into being able to give correlation results for the users.
And is that part of the, not to put you on the spot here, but is that kind of, I know you're working on a patent or maybe you already got one. Is that kind of part of where the patent comes in, if you're allowed to say?
Not yet. So on the output side, how Listen itself does the correlation analysis and the data model for strategy and how we calculate return on investment for different strategies per industry, all of that is what our patent covers. And we're going
Nice.
to additionally be patenting how we gather data and how we do that, as well as several other big new features that we're going to be rolling out in the coming months.
Well,
So
that's
yeah,
quite
there's
an
a lot of
undertaking.
different
That's
aspects.
impressive. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, just as being a data person myself, I mean, I think you've already hit on them, but do you have any success stories where people have really, like they've used this data to kind of change their course or that, because I think you told me before, people come to you guys a lot of times kind of in a bind, right? Or sometimes
Yes.
they're like, hey, I got this mandate, I got to cut money,
Yes.
Kevin, can you guys help us? Um,
Yes, yes. A couple of stories I could tell real quick. So there is one of our early adopters who actually used one of our earliest beta versions of the product more than 18 months ago now.
wow.
There was a lot of decisions that needed to be made in their organization. They're in financial services that relate to data governance and data protection, because being in financial services, protecting PII, protecting personal financial information is very important. So
Yeah.
one of the things that came out of our tool, out of Listen for them, was to shift how they were going about actually investing in data governance. Because as important as data governance is, and it is, it didn't rank, say, in the top 10 for them of areas to invest in. But there were
Okay.
manual processes that can be looked at for data governance involving more customized training for the staff and some other things versus spending a lot of money on a data governance tool. The data didn't support that. So there was a huge shift in
Yeah.
kind of the
Wow.
approach, the actual cybersecurity roadmap, a shifted approach to go about data governance in a less costly way to still go after the same goals. And that came from Listen's data.
Wow.
Another great example, and you mentioned the need to make cuts, and I've this is far too common, and It
Yeah.
stresses me even when I think about it, because it's such a hard place to be for a cyber decision
Yeah.
maker.
Can
But we
imagine.
have an organization that's been using our tool for some time. They've been told they have across the board budget cuts they're going to have to make. And that is a terrible place to be, because you have to decide, where am I going to pull back? It usually can't be staff, because you never have enough staff. It's going to be
Right.
tools, or it's going to be in cadence of operations. And this organization, they were like, well, maybe, because of these cuts, I can't buy new tools. And, we wanted them to buy Listen. But at the same time, this individual realized, their CISO realized, maybe it's worth still keeping Listen around, because your tool can help me see where I can cut and do the least damage to our actual outcomes. Because everything we do is an outcome focused cybersecurity analysis. So by keeping our tool in the loop has allowed them to go about seeing where they can make cuts that
Yeah.
damage everything the least statistically, looking at the data. What are the things where we maybe are overspending a little that we can cut back, that don't all of a sudden dramatically increase, the rate of failure that we see in similar orgs. So
Got it.
having a tool like that is huge at your fingertips when you do have to make those kinds of changes.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's that's those are quite the stories. Maybe let me, and I understand kind of you reached a milestone recently with your company, I think with something you released. Maybe
Yes.
tell us a little bit. And that's what I was, my train of thought got lost. Before we get in that real quick, you guys it's a subscription based thing, right? So you
Yes,
guys
it
will
is.
offer, okay. That's what I
Yeah,
thought, but
that's a great point to bring up, and that's because, like we've noted, the data changes. And again, there's a little better example than what just recently happened with CrowdStrike. And then 6 months ago, the biggest talk of the town, everybody's focus was kind of still on zero trust. Like, what is zero trust? What does it mean? We have the aspects of zero trust in our model. You can see kind of this part or that part. But if you did, if we offer this as a kind of a one-hit thing where you buy it and use it and you're done, that does a disservice to these users, because the nature of technology change, the rate that AI is changing alone for the business to use it, we've begun collecting data and structuring a new version of our model to specifically look at the events and failures security wise of business use AI tools, generative AI tools, because we need to have those analytics to show to the cyber people to say, hey, here's what's working best and here's what isn't. Here's what's too costly. Here's what's a good investment to protect these new Gen AI tools. So because there's always something new, we realized we needed to
yeah.
offer this as an ongoing engagement, so that our users should be in it week to week, month to month, quarter to quarter, and see what changes over time. So we offer it as an annual subscription for that reason, with no limits on seats. They buy access for their org. It can be everyone on the team who logs in and sees it, or it can be just the cyber decision maker. Unlimited use of the tool, unlimited logins for that annual subscription.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that. Sorry, my mind jumps around at times. So thanks for clarifying that. So now let me ask my question about tell us about the milestone I guess you just reached. I think you just
Yes.
released something. Tell us
We
about that.
did. Yeah, we just released what we call Listen 2.0, which is our first full-fledged version of the tool with a significant new capability that I'm so excited to talk about. And you have to
Yeah,
forgive me, I get really excited when I talk about all this,
I
because it's
love it.
literally what I wanted to have when I was a working CISO, and now we've built it. What we've done in our newest release, it just came out at the beginning of July, is add in a compliance area. So compliance is tricky, right? Everyone needs to be compliant. And one of our new kind of taglines that our awesome marketing director has come up with is, you have to be compliant, but you don't have to overspend on compliance. Why has there not been a tool out there that will look at how you are pursuing compliance and give you analytics on the cost value in terms of your
Okay.
actual security? Too often, compliant, there's 1,000 ways to be compliant. Like, you
Mhm.
could be compliant tool wise or process wise or operations or personnel wise. And the question is, well, if you have to do it anyway, you have to be compliant, what way gives the best actual outcomes, so that you're not wasting money, or so that you're not under investing on
Yeah.
something that you could do cheaply, but will get you in trouble because you may have a breach, you may have a failure. So we've
Right.
added a whole section to our tool, this new release. It's called the Compliance Center, that tracks your strategies versus compliance to NIST, and within a little bit of time here, also mapping over to ISO, and then adding more standards as we go. That not only shows you your estimated compliance level, your maturity scores, but that shows you your investment risk and how you're being compliant. based on the same answers that I mentioned before, your baseline of what you're actually doing. It kind of
So cool.
unlocks and shows real world answers for how to be compliant so that you can cost optimize your compliance instead of just throwing money at compliance to check boxes and never really knowing, is it helping you be secure? So that's what we've done now. And it is, it's super exciting.
And that's part of the Listen. That's part of the Listen product, or that's a separate.
No, it's built into Listen as an included feature.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
congrats on that. That is amazing. I want to shift to a little bit, I just always like to understand, like, what's it like being on this? So about being on the startup journey. I mean, I think you mentioned 18 months. Is that about right? Or just tell
No,
me, I
it's
guess,
over 2 years now. It's over
is
two
it?
years.
Okay.
We're coming on 2.5 years now since we actually had day one of operations in the middle of 2022. So
Nice.
yeah, it's
That's
it's been it's really been an interesting journey. The bad side was, as you probably know just from the news, we started off at a time when venture capital investing actually started to die down. We went
right.
through a negative time where seed round and pre-seed venture capital was kind of drying up. But on the good side, we're operating in cybersecurity and AI, which are hot fields. I mean, you're never going to have more need than nowadays in cybersecurity. It only grows. The need
Right.
grows because the attackers, wow, are the attackers getting better and better at what they do? And they're taking advantage, and they're putting more and more pressure on the blue teamers, on the defenders. So because of that, even though it was a negative time for the general world of investing, we've basically thrived. We've been able to come through that and get to a point now where we have not only our original Listen 1.0 and 1.1, but now 2.0, including compliance, and it's got strategic threat mapping and all these other capabilities. There's so many things we haven't even mentioned yet that I wish we could, but I would
Yeah.
go on for hours without stopping. But all these capabilities for letting users model cybersecurity, we've been able to build those out through, frankly, what's been for most of the rest of the world of startups, a really tough time. So
Right.
it's an interesting thing. It's all about the people. Like, our team are just fantastic. The folks I mentioned are amazing developers. Our OSINT engineers, our marketing team, everyone is absolutely the most top notch of professionals, and that has made a big difference too, and allowing us to get where we are.
It's got to be kind of an electric feeling. I've never really worked in that environment. That's probably partially why I'm vicariously, just because you hear about it and you just wonder what it's like. And but it sounds like so tell me, I guess, a little bit about the day to day. I think we were talking even right before we went on, is like, how do you know what to spend your time on? I mean, what do you spend your time, like, as the trying to
Yes.
lead this company? There's got to be so many things you could do. Maybe just give us a little insight into that.
It's funny. There's been so many times we've made the joke that's not really a joke, that I wish we had a tool like Listen for how to operate a startup, because people have done this a lot. How come there's not a data tool out
Right.
there to tell you based on what industry you're in? Well, you get the gist.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I kind of want to build a data analytics tool for everything. Like, so
Yeah.
many problems in the world, to me, not all of them, obviously, but there are
Yeah.
a lot of problems in the world where the questions are data questions and no one's using data to answer them. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
So in
No.
cybersecurity, we have that now. But in the day to day, the biggest issue for any startup, right, is funding and fundraising. That's always kind of dominated what I do, is just trying to keep the dollars flowing on sales and the dollars
Yeah.
flowing from investors when we need them, so that we can grow rapidly and try to scale and get our solution out to market in the best possible way to actually solve the problems of cyber decision makers, and to do it in an affordable way, and into we really, our vision is a huge vision to revolutionize how cyber programs get built. We want every cyber program in the world to start off in the hands of a cyber decision maker, to start with the data, to start with analytics day one, saying, okay, clean slate, what do the analytics say? So we know we're starting on a foundation that's based on the real world and on real outcomes, not just on random, compliance, or at just kind of throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. Start with the data and then always follow the data. That's our vision, to make it easier and easier and more automated. So, like, our focus has been that, and that's kind of, where when I'm not basically, raising funds, talking to
Yeah.
investors, talking sales, talking to potential customers, my focus then leans back into the product to talk about, where can we take this? What can this become? How can this become like the science fiction, super advanced
Yeah.
AI model that's going to be in the hip pocket of every cyber decision maker, giving them answers to their questions whenever they need them, and doing it securely and anonymously so that no cyber decision maker is ever left out in the cold having to wonder what works best. So that's
Yeah.
kind of where I live. Most of my time when I'm not doing those other things is back trying to answer the question, what can we do to help cybersecurity in a whole new way and revolutionize how the people who own these programs, how they do what they do.
Amazing. So maybe one other question on that, just how did you know, like, so you had this germ of an idea, you're kind of like, how did it get from, that this, because I, as an ideas guy, I feel like I get ideas all the time. Some of them are probably pretty bad, but some of them I think are decent. Like, how do you know, like, how did you kind of know, like, okay, this is, I guess, did you just kind of start small and then you kind of start, because obviously to build kind of what you did, obviously didn't happen overnight. And how did you know, like, okay, this is gonna be a real thing? We're doing this.
Well, that's interesting. A lot of it had to do with the fact that the problem we're solving is a really universal problem and a lived problem for me and for a lot of the folks that that I talk to that are just in the same space that work in cyber. Seeing what it is and kind of being able to envision what the answer could be, what a
Yeah,
way to solve the problem because of lived experience, that was the start. The idea of being able to bring answers, again, making kind of a business intelligence tool but in the cybersecurity space that uses OSINT and that does it in this way, it was a kind of a natural fix to this bigger picture problem.
yeah,
But then the rest of it really just came in using it over time, producing it and sharing it and getting feedback and working with our team, internal here to Level 6, the incredible brain power of, again, everyone from our data OSINT engineers to marketing, to our development team, to our data scientists and our data guys, them constantly churning and looking at what we have and saying, okay, now we could do this. Now we could do that. Now we could take it here. It always comes down to the individuals who are looking at what we've done and what the vision is and, paving that way to get to this really, really advanced, again, almost sci-fi like vision, making that into reality. It's all about the people, the people on our team that actually make it happen, who write the code, who build the
yeah.
data warehouse, who control the cloud environment, who see the data and manage data quality, all of these things. That is really the key. So it's part vision, but then so much on execution to really make it happen. And that's probably true
Right.
for every arena.
Right. Well, I've tell everybody, I mean, ever since I met Kevin, like, Kevin's the real deal. I love the passion, and I want nothing but the best for you, and I'll help you however I can. So, but Kevin, with that, thank you so much for joining us. What's the best way for people to get involved, learn more, get a hold of you, your
Yeah.
company?
Well,
What's the
right
best
on
way?
our website is the perfect place to start. We're at level, then the number 6, cyber.com. So level6cyber.com. All of our listen product and a ton of extra collateral is there. Everything from white papers to, to links to see demo. Everything is out there. Videos, you name it. So that's the right place. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn. You can see me there as the CEO of Level 6. I'm on Twitter as Kevin J _cyber1. And all of our team is out there too. But probably the website's the right place to start, or just ping me on LinkedIn. My
Right.
direct messages for messaging on LinkedIn are open. We love to talk to folks in the space and even outside the space. We often
Yeah.
talk to compliance folks, to C-suiters, to IT managers, to people who are just part of cybersecurity teams who want to learn more. We love to talk to everybody. So, anyone wants to reach out, please do.
All right. Well, with that, Kevin, thank you so much. I love it. A data-driven company that's going to make a huge impact. Already is making a huge impact, but it's just going to keep growing. So, Kevin Jackson, thanks again. The real deal here. So, thanks for being here, and we'll see everybody next time.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.